Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Breaking Bread. I'm Gabby Loren.
And I'm Alie Valerio.
And today we have another fun-filled episode where we get to learn more about Jewish life and how to really thrive in life as well. So we have our special guest today, Lawrence, on the line. Lawrence is not only a friend of both Alie and mine, but he's also a fellow entrepreneur and also a financial strategist. So Lawrence, please introduce yourself and tell us about your background and where you come from in Judaism.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. As you're saying, currently I run a business consulting company as an entrepreneur, helping entrepreneurs build their business from a strategic and financial perspective. From a background point of view, I grew up in South Africa, mostly secular, somewhat traditional. It's everyone pretty much in South Africa is very much. We all kind of consider ourselves Orthodox, but not religious. So it's ascribed to one way of doing things, but being very irreligious and more traditional in our way. It was only really when I was about 16 on my first trip to Israel that I actually really connected to religion, to Judaism, to God. We actually went on a 3-month trip that was basically allowed us to kind of finish our 10th grade in Israel. And it was, besides for just learning and finishing our grade, we did touring all around the country. We spent a week in the army, a week at the kibbutz, a week in yeshiva learning. So really just getting a flavor for just all aspects of Israel, of Judaism, of our background, heritage. And that really gave me the first sense of, openness of what does Judaism really mean. And I took on quite a lot of even religious laws and became quite, to some extent, definitely from where I am now, more religious, trying to keep Shabbat and keep kosher. I even took on some prayers, and even coming back after the trip, continued and maintained quite a bit of that. Obviously not to the same extent. It's always hard when you get back into our same day-to-day life. But throughout my early 20s, I still maintained keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher. I would add certain prayers to my day, and throughout my 20s, that was very much. It was very still apparent, and then one day I kind of realized that my relationship with religion there was a large negative aspect to it, which came from fear as opposed to really wanting to do things. And what that really means is that, and perhaps it's because of my personality, I'm also got like a perfectionist or OCD type of personality. So when I would slip up or not do something or eat something that I was trying not to eat, I would feel I'm going to have a bad day now, or I'm not going to succeed and things like that. And that created a lot of anxiety in my life, which I thought obviously is not healthy. I don't think that that's really what it's about and what God wants to create. And you've got this concept of punishment and reward, and it's not a healthy way to connect to it. So I actually spent a lot of time to take a step out of that and be more comfortable, really approaching it from wanting to do things, not kind of giving up things, so that I would actually feel comfortable with that path, and then refinding things out of love. And what I ultimately found from that process was the importance of separating out God and religion, right? Because so often I think nowadays we experience one or the other, and it's when someone wants to become religious, they're trying to learn what are the laws, what are the details, what I need to take on, and they miss often the bigger picture, right? I personally felt that that happened to me, possibly because I was young. as a young person, I don't necessarily, you don't have the same maturity of being able to really think in the broader picture. So you're just trying to take on certain things. And when I guess developed that sense of maturity, I would, I then kind of realized I needed to take a step back and understand just basics of how do I see God? How does that really reflect in my life? What do I really believe? And what does that mean? What do I really want to do?
Right. So it looks like you had, the religion, and you separated that from your belief in God and your faith in God and your connection to God. So now that's an interesting point you bring up, because with religion, obviously, when we study Torah, there's all these rules and restrictions, but they're not necessarily interpreted correctly. Like, some people may take it on as like, wow, this feels like a lot. This is a lot of rules, and I feel like I'm being held back or forced to be controlled or in a structured setting. But really, and I know Alie probably feels this way, is that the right way to look at this, most likely, I don't want to say the right way because everyone has different ways, but one way to look at it is that, it could provide freedom in a sense by not looking at it from a structured point of view, from a controlling point of view, but something to better your life and enhance your life and provide a fulfilled life, right? So you shouldn't be knocking yourself on every little detail, which it sounds like you did in the beginning, and it was creating a lot of stress. And so you were able to kind of like put that to the side for a second and let me just communicate with God and find that connection so that I can start at square one and then maybe I'll get to square 10 later, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great point. I mean, I was approaching things from an extreme of fear and which creates a lot of anxiety, as opposed to really connecting to things for the right reason, and really wanting to do things. It's like someone, for example, who's vegan, they're less inclined to generally, they don't slip up, right? You don't see vegans every fourth day going to eat meat, right? Because they've got something driving them that they really connect to and want to do it. I mean, I'm not personally vegan, but it's the same concept in terms of, how people, how I at least wanted to approach religion, and I didn't feel like that was how I was doing it. And now I'm not that overly religious, but I believe that I'm connecting from the ground up and building my foundation more from connecting to God than connecting to just religion.
Well, I think that's really interesting because most people associate a belief in God with religion. So it's interesting that you kind of took God out of the equation and just isolated it in a way of like, okay, I don't necessarily want to like be religious, but I want to explore my relationship with God. So how has exploring your relationship with God changed the way that you perceive it? And like, how has it changed your life?
You're right. So I think that first and foremost is asking myself that question of what is God, right? How do I relate to God, and what does that mean for the way I live my life? And to answer that, I see God as purely energy that's empowering everything around us, right? So if we think about science has shown that every single thing in the world is made up of this exact same molecule at different levels of vibration, right? That's what creates a solid, a liquid, a gas. And at the same time, the Torah as well talks about how God is everything, right? And those are basically the only ways you can coincide those two. So if God is in everything and you can now see God in everything, that means God is beyond just religion. So, for me, seeing God as the totality and religion as then a subset, as one way to reach God and connect to God, along with many other ways, right? And I found for myself, if I don't, if I'm not seeing God in everything, in the mundane, in my everyday, then my relationship with God is not complete, right? It's only you have to be separated, and then to reshape the way I kind of then relate that to my everyday world is, firstly, I'd have to separate out two things, right? One, things that are in my control and things that are not in my control, right? Because I think God has a different relationship in our lives in each of those two aspects. So starting off with the things that are not in our control, right? If we were to subscribe to the fact that God is everything and is only good, and is love and is all empowering, then anything that is not in control, right, has to be good and has to be perfect, right? Perfect as by definition not perceived as perfect, but how it's supposed to be, right? And ultimately perfect. So, if you can surrender to that and say everything out of your control is perfect, right? So I think it's for me, it's been a extremely empowering way of looking at it. For example, my father passed away when I was young, and went through a lot of hardships. Just being raised with a single mother, we really didn't have that much resources, and it created a lot of it created a character within me. Now, obviously, I can. I mean, it's a limited belief to try explain why hardships have happened to us, but having the outlook that it is perfect and it's how exactly it's supposed to be, we can start getting a sense of where our purpose is and what how to be positive around that. So for me, I think that my part of my purpose in life is to help motivate and provide positivity and a unique way of looking at things. And I wouldn't have had that ability to do that myself if I didn't have hardships in my life, and I wasn't forced to be persistent of solving things when I would have otherwise had my back up against the wall, right? And that's created a way of thinking in me that was necessary for me to solve that purpose. And so, even hardships that I've been in, that we've all been in, they can all be reshaped. And I think it's really important to have that level of positivity. And then on the other side, to talk about then things that are in our control. So, we talked about fear, which as a negative, right? But at the same time, and it took me a while to kind of get to this realization. But Rabbi Dembo, rabbi and author in Los Angeles, talks about, reshapes the kind of concept of fear very well, which I really resonated with a lot. And he talks about it as not just as it's not fear of punishment and reward or heaven and hell and things like that. It's more just an understanding of consequence. So, a mature adult, as opposed to a child, has to realize that their decisions have a consequence, right? Child mentality is to scream and kick for candy, and also not want to feel sick after having that candy, right? That's that. But as you get mature and grow with your understanding, you have to take ownership that your decision has tremendous impact on the rest of your life, right? You can either mess up your life completely or make your life a complete success. That ability is within us, right? That is in our control. Now that's scary. That's it's fearful, but it also should be empowering, right? Now, if we take that way of looking at fear and then shaping that for anything that actually is in our control, right? That then basically means that it's not up to God, it's up to us, right? God takes care of things in perfection that is, things that are not in our control, and He's designed this perfect world, right? And for me, I personally believe that everything else that is in our control, God has created a system for us to run our own world, right? Create our own life, be the masters of our own destiny. I know a lot of people will say, well, no, God runs everything, and that's fine. Everyone can believe what they want to believe and whatever they resonate to. For me, the most important thing is that I've found is if I personally believe that I can tap into that energy, that power of God, through manifestation, through visualization, through just empowering and growing in myself, just as God has that ability to actually make a decision, take ownership, take out the noise of anything that was not in my control, and not just hope for things to happen, but make them happen.
Amen. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with how does God go into goal setting for you? Like, so you have a relationship with God now, correct?
Right.
Even though you don't consider yourself super religious. So how much of an effort do we play in setting goals and like accomplishing our goals, and how much of that is just happens because of destiny?
Yeah, so as I kind of said, I think it's completely dependent on two sides of the world, right? On one side, you have to separate out what is not in your control. And then at that point, we have to, when it comes to goals and the things that we're going to rely on, because no goals we can accomplish on our own, right? We need things to go our way. We need other people to cooperate. We need things to happen for our goals to manifest. So, anything that's not in our control, we have to somewhat rely on a higher power that it goes well. And for me, I found having those two sides of it as, helping me cut out that noise. So now that I don't have to, waste effort and mind energy on all the things that are outside of my control, I can now set my goals and focus my to-do list on what I actually have to do around what is in my control. Right?
So do you have an example of that in your life? An example of like a goal you've set and where you've seen God through that goal?
Yeah, honestly, being an entrepreneur, there's just it's really it's an emotional roller coaster, right? It's I'm about 3 years into the business. Obviously, the feeling of that emotional roller coaster gets easier to handle with time, but in the first year and the second year as well, there's times when I literally feel on top of the world, and even in the same week, I can feel completely useless, right? And you feel, it's an emotional roller coaster that a lot of people will say not everyone has the stomach to handle that. And for me, having that faith in God is for sure helps me stomach that, and then make decisions with that faith in mind. Because without that faith in mind, there would have been many times where I would have quit and stopped, because if I feel useless, I've got nothing to back myself on, right? But having that faith and using that faith to help me make decisions of like sticking it through, I've set every part of my business. I kind of set milestones. It's like, okay, I need to achieve this. Like when I started out, for example, I was like, okay, by the end of year 1, I need to be able to meet my own expenses, right? And if I'm not meeting my expenses, I've got to say, okay, well, let's let's go back into a nice cushy job, and I managed to get to that milestone, and then at that milestone, you want to create your next milestone. At some points, it looks like you're going to miss it, and at some points, it looks like you're going to hit it. But always, I think, relying for me on that faith through the hard times as well as the good times. It helps me make decisions and stay mindful of what actually is in my control, and therefore focused on my goals.
Interesting. So how have you used that connection with God to grow from these experiences you talk about? Where do you find yourself today? And what other resources have you used to strengthen your growth more recently?
Yeah, look, I've always been one very much into self-development, self-growth. I've used a lot of books that have shaped my way of thinking, from self-development to anything that I feel I'm curious about, to weak at, or things that I'm just interested in. But ultimately, I think by learning how to constantly see God in everything, right? Beyond just that religion, so being able to separate that out, see God in everything, It's continuously creates a relationship, because I'm always at the point where there's many things out of my control that I'm going to rely and surrender to, as well as knowing it also creates the feeling for me that it's more than just about me, right? There's a society that we have to be mindful of. If things are in our control and God has given us the power to create that, it's our role to be kind to other people, to look out for people, because we as a society are impacted by what everyone does. I mean, we're sitting all locked down right now indoors, not because of what either three of us have done, right? So society is impacted by each other's actions, and it really is our role to be mindful of that. And I think having that constant connection to the whole, I feel makes me a better person as well.
Nice. So you used books as resources, and also just being around other like-minded people, it seems.
Yeah. Great. Books, being other people, asking questions. I've many times asked the same question again and again to different people, because I don't like to just learn something and then someone tells me that, it's like, okay, that's the reason, right? I want to find the reason that really resonates with me, that I connect with, that feels really right. I don't believe that just because someone is a rabbi, or just as I wouldn't believe that just because someone is a doctor, they necessarily have the best answer, right? They're obviously the authorities to go to, but every rabbi, just as every doctor, will see things differently. That's why people choose different doctors, right? So I think for me, it's been important to, ask the questions to different people, find that reason that really resonates with me, what I really connect to, that I can grow from a place of authenticity.
Do you find that your successes in your business come from your faith and your connection to God?
Yeah, it's a mixture. I mean, I think obviously I obviously have to do what is required. Again, if there's things that are in my control that I have to work on and do, but so much is outside of my control that I would be nowhere without having that faith or having God intervene in making things work out, right?
Yes.
But so it's I think there's always both sides to it, that I think it's important to not assume that God just runs everything, but to take ownership of some, but also to surrender to the things that are out of your control.
It sounds like you're talking about free will and then also divine intervention.
Yeah.
Right, Alie?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how do you tiptoe around that, though? Because I think a lot of people are very pragmatic, especially people who don't believe in God or don't believe in religion. So because it seems like you're a pretty rational person, how do you kind of balance that, setting goals and having intentions and then maybe not seeing through to them and being like, well, maybe it's for a higher purpose? How can you be rational and also believe in something that doesn't really exist? And how do you know that it exists? Is there an example or an experience?
I mean, I personally, I found God, as you can hear in kind of how I describe it, I found God in a rational way because I'm a rational person. I think everyone will find God in their own way and will ask the question. The important thing is to ask those same questions, as in, what do I believe? How does that affect my day? So, I can, like I said to you, I believe God is energy. Now, I'm not going to just say that, but I'm connecting that to scientific rationale of how everything is made up of that same molecule. The same thing, how I am balancing that free will with divine intervention is by separating out those two sides of my life, of what is in my control and what is not, and taking ownership for the things that are, and saying, that's where my free will is, and I have to man up and know that within the realm of what's in my control, I can mess up my life or I can make my life. And God is not going to intervene in that, right? He may help you in certain ways and give you gifts along the way, but that's part of the things that are out of your control. But it is up to you to create that destiny, and that's how so that's for me how I've on a rational point of view and setting my own goals and achieving and being taking control of my life. But then on the other hand, anything that is out of my control, having that faith and knowing that things will work out perfectly because God is only perfect and is only good, and therefore if it's out of my control, it can only be good. And if I think sometimes that it's not good and I'm questioning it, then I try to reshape that and say, well, why would it be good, right? Why is that good? Maybe I didn't think that was what I wanted in the first place, but maybe it's just because I need to reshape, like maybe I've been chasing the wrong dream in the first place. So it not working out is good in a different way than I would have thought.
I love what you said earlier too. You were talking about imperfection and how even the things that are imperfect are like perfect because it's like God and it's what is meant to be. Like that really struck me as such a beautiful way to think about things, because so often we have like it has to be this and then it doesn't work out that way. We're like, oh, we get so upset. But if you see the imperfections as perfect and exactly as they should be, it's easier to kind of like flow with it and move on.
Exactly. I mean, things are only imperfect because we decide to judge them as such, right? I have a
God is perfect, right?
Right. It's because if our definition of God is goodness and perfect, then everything again that is not in our control and that's not manly intervened has to be perfect. That doesn't mean that bad doesn't exist in the world, right? But that's not because of God. It's because man intervened. It's like people always try to blame God for this bad thing, but then why aren't you blaming man for that, right? It's man who's polluting the world or creating war. It's not God. So we have to take ownership for what is in our control. But at the same time, it's life, I really believe it is perfect, and once we reshape that lens of understanding that it is perfect, sometimes we can even get hints of, well, if it is perfect, then maybe that's telling me something about my path, right? So like I said, if I was seeing something is not working out because of, I'm just hitting myself against a wall all the time, maybe that's like, it feels imperfect, but maybe that's actually just a hint to say, well, maybe I shouldn't be like focusing on that.
Isn't it true though that in Torah we're all like built in the image of God, right? So we're all like a piece of God, but we're actually not perfect. And that's why we do the different mitzvahs so that we can be more like God, because God is perfect.
I agree with you. I don't think that means we're not perfect. I think we're.
Think we are?
Yeah. So I think it's a weird thing to say that we are perfect, but we are human that's prone to make mistakes and error. I don't think that doesn't make us perfect, right? So I think we are born in the image of God with basically the power and free will to create our world and to do and have a free will of doing good or bad, right? So throughout our life we have biases and things like that may influence our ability to make an unbiased decision. And that in itself becomes imperfect. But I don't know if I don't know if that means at our core we're not perfect. I think we're made perfect and good, and we then just have a free will of what do we do.
Interesting.
I think it's also subjective to, I don't know if I'm using this word correctly, but subjective to the situation, right? So I think in God's image we were created, so that is perfect in God's image. But as we go through life and we're slowly more disconnected from God per se, as we get older, we lose that innocence and instant connection. So we have to build it back up to gain that connection back or just get closer to it.
Yeah.
So I think that we are kind of pulled a little bit further from perfection as we get older, and we need to do these mitzvot and pray and talk to God in order to reestablish that, so that we can, like Alie mentioned, maybe, become more perfect, but also be more like God, be more of God-like, right? We're not trying to necessarily replicate God, but we're of God, so we want to have that closer connection to what He would do and His feelings.
Exactly. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Obviously, as you say, as we get older, we naturally will move away from that. But that, it's because as we age, we've made more and more incorrect free will decisions, right? No human's going to ever make the perfect decision at every point in their time. Everyone's going to slip up. That's part of the, that free will ability is part of the journey.
Right? But also, what is perfect? Because perfect is based on one's opinion of perfect.
Imperfect is perfect.
These are labels that we've associated with what we think is right, wrong, good, bad, perfect, imperfect, whatever it may be.
That's also what the beauty of Judaism is, though, is that we have these different mitzvahs that we're supposed to follow, which help us become more like God, which is more perfect. And I think, like what you were discussing earlier about like taking on Shabbat or keeping kosher, like those are different ways that we can become more like God, but we have to find it in our own way and in our own path. And it's surely a journey. Here we go.
Yes. And I think also the key in this conversation, and something we can really take away, is that maybe don't be so hard on yourself as we hear Lawrence's story, and all these decisions he has to make as an entrepreneur, to not maybe just be so hard on yourself if you fail or something doesn't go as planned. Like, pick yourself back up and learn from it and move forward, and establish that connection with yourself and with God to like move forward in it. Alie, Amen. Is there any particular instance in your life where you've seen God's presence through your growth and your goal setting? Have you been able to connect the whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've experienced God throughout my life without fully understanding it because I wasn't super religious or connected to Judaism until the past 2 years. But even like recently, I have my own online coaching company, and I met a client at a Shabbat dinner, and he connected me to my now business partner, who initially I wasn't interested in really like working with because I had my own business. But then I followed the path, and I was like, okay, I'll talk to this guy. Fast forward, he becomes my business partner. All of my friends now and clients are like Orthodox Jews. I start to get more into this community, especially in the Pico area. I get introduced to Rabbi Teller. I meet you guys. So it's just like the power of saying yes and showing up and being curious, like what Lawrence was just talking about, is like, well, let me take on this and let me take on that. And through that process, I feel more connected to God. And now if something bad happens, quote unquote, I'm more chill about it. I'm like, okay, well, everything is happening for me, not to me, but it's a journey.
Exactly.
What about you?
I love what you just said about everything's happening for me and not to me. It's getting yourself out of victim mode. So for me, most recently is because of COVID-19. We've all been stuck at home, and a lot of people are out of work. Some people are still fortunate enough to be working from home, but I know in Los Angeles, as of last week, 45% of Los Angeles County was the only people left employed. So more than 50% of people are currently out of work, which is crazy. So that's 55, I believe, if I'm doing the math correct. And that means we all have to get used to a new normal. So that can also put you out of place and make you feel uncomfortable when you're used to controlling situations or, a type A, right? I think I've had enough experience in this area where life has thrown so many things my way that I'm starting to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and letting go and surrendering, like we've talked about throughout this podcast today.
Amen.
So in, being forced to be comfortable with this new uncomfortable situation, I am releasing anxiety. I'm releasing stress about it. I'm trying to find routine, setting goals, writing things down that I want to get accomplished, having conversations with my family, friends like you about what I want to do, what my goals are, and manifesting that right before my eyes. So it's baby steps. You're not going to see, growth and change overnight, but the smallest things I'm noticing God's hands in, which is this entire situation, but then also the little moments for me where I can feel at ease with something or be able to calm my mind and work through it. And that's making me a more relaxed, level-headed individual that's grounded with her 2 feet on the ground. And I would call that growth. So
Amen.
yeah, amen. And Baruch Hashem, that keeps going. But yes, that's how I see God, goals and growth in all of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, and to add on to your point, both of you, you started this podcast, for example, through this whole epidemic. So you've obviously both, that's really taking positive out of a negative situation, because anyone can just be sitting in front of the TV, drinking wine and having a couch, whereas you've both taken an approach of doing something better, doing something productive. Let's start a podcast. And I don't know if you wanted to discuss about that that positivity and your own goal setting and actually making this a reality.
Right. And at the same time, like to your point, we're beginning this now, but we have to see it grow, this baby grow. It's not going to happen overnight, but our growth is happening through it. And the growth of our podcast will happen, over time. So it should be a lesson for everybody that it's not an overnight situation. Your well-being is not an overnight situation, your circumstances. And if you want to make changes in your life, those changes take time, and baby steps is okay. Like a little baby step every day will still get you closer to bigger change by the end of the year after the 365 days.
And grow through what you go through.
Yes.
Yeah. Success is just making the right habits.
Yes. And on that note,
yes. So Lawrence, how do we find you? How do people find you? What's your company?
So the company is called Angelytics. Angel for synonymous with startups and helping startups, and then YTIX. So Angelytics.com is the website. You can obviously find me as well on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Lawrence Brown, and happy to connect.
And for you, Alie?
And then for me, Facebook, you can find me on Facebook at Alie Valerio, ALIEVALERIO, and my Instagram is Alie V Health, like alive, ALIEV Health. And Gabby?
And you guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Gabby Loren TV. That's GABBYLOREN TV. And if you are loving this podcast, please hit the subscribe button below. And also leave a comment and a thumbs up if you're enjoying our series. If you would like to be a guest on the show, or you have someone you'd love to recommend or refer, maybe it's someone you follow on social media that you think would be a great addition and would make a great episode, let us know, leave a comment, and we'll reach out to them. We do want to help change your lives and make your lives better throughout all of the mess and chaos. Be a little form of stability in between it all, right?
Yes. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love you. Love your two favorite Jewish girls and Lawrence.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Guys. Have an amazing day.
Bye.